All right, editing your memoir. So I'm going to give you, these are the editing instructions before you decide whether you want to publish it or not. There is a second, I'm going to talk about this in this. There's a second set of editing instructions if you decide to publish it. And we're not going to talk about that today because that's not the stage that you're at. So let's say your vomit draft is done, what we call a rough draft, right? Rest for at least 2 weeks before editing, right? Like literally just let it all rest. Set it down. Don't think about it. You know the reason to do that, why you do this, right? Because by the time you come back to it, you're going to have forgotten the book, a lot of the book, and it'll be really fresh to you. This just happened with me. I'm in the middle of editing the first novel I've ever written. It's like more of a parable, but it's still the first fiction book I've ever written. And it was crazy. Like this one chapter, I was like, I'd forgotten I'd written it. It's like, oh, who wrote this? They're really smart. I'm like, I wrote this. This is amazing. It was funny. The things that I didn't like, I remembered. The things I did like, I didn't remember. It was pretty funny. Yeah. All right. So how to edit your memoir. There's really only 2 steps before you make a decision to publish. And I'm going to go over them. The first one is the get it in edit. So this is basically just deciding, ensuring, is every story and event in the book that you want in there? Have you covered it all? Have you written about it all? Chances are very high that your first pass through, you will miss a lot of stories. Usually you're going to figure this out as you start writing, honestly. You're going to write about one story and it's going to lead you to 3 other stories you'd forgotten about, and you're going to write those, and that's super normal. But then even once you finish, you're going to come back to it and realize, oh yeah, there's like 5 other stories that I want in there, right? So just go through, keep going through until you're like, all right, it's got everything. Then the second edit is called the connect the dots edit. So when you have every event and story you want in there, then you have an opportunity to go deeper. You don't have to take this, but there's an opportunity. The point, the questions you ask yourself is, did I tell every part of my story I wanted to tell that's relevant for this book? Because you may be writing about, like, let's say your divorce. So did I tell every part of my divorce that I wanted to tell? So just what's in that book? And then does it all make sense? And is it in the right order? Right? Just because you told a story does not mean you told the whole truth about it. And in fact, I can tell you, for me, I can't tell you, man, most stories, especially ones that have any emotional truth for me, I've usually got to tell them a couple times before I get to like the core truth for myself. And it's not like I'm trying to lie. I just don't know it sometimes myself. I have to write it out or talk it out, right? So here's a big question. This is one of the big techniques that we teach that's amazing. How do you know if you're not telling yourself the whole truth? So this is Kwan. He wrote a memoir with us at Scribe. It's coming out soon. It's called The Bird in the Wire. It's in the Razor Wire. It's really good. Kwan spent 16 years in prison for murder, like straight up shot a man in cold blood and tried to kill 3 others. And like the stories about kind of like that, and then his time in prison and how he reformed. And Kwan is such an amazing human. I would literally let this guy babysit my kids. I have 3 young kids. He's been convicted of murder that he did, he admits. And I would at this point, probably not 12 years ago, right? But right now, I would let him watch my kids. That's how amazing the transformation has been in Kwan. And so I didn't know him before, obviously. I mean, I don't even know him now. And Kwan told me about this technique he uses, that he used in prison, and that he used also writing his memoir. And so we've made it part of our program because it's incredible. It's called Kwan's Table of Truth. He called it the Table of Truth, but it's Kwan's Table of Truth now because it's his. So he imagines himself right there. Like, imagine he's right there, and he's coming up on, like anything. Okay, I got to write about the time I stole a car. What do I say? Right? And yeah, it's like, okay, my technique is I just always tell the truth, right? But then the question you got to ask yourself, because it is a very valid question, how do I know this is the whole truth? So he imagines having to defend this truth, having to answer for it in front of 3 people. His dad, who died when he was 12, and he had extremely close relationship with, his 12-year-old self, and the man he killed. whose name is Min Win. So like he has every truth he tells, he's got to say, could I look these three in the eye and stand behind it? It's just like, man, it doesn't get more powerful than that. Now, obviously, your table of truth would not be the man that Kwan killed. That wouldn't make sense, or his dad, or whatever. You can think about your own three people, right? But this is a really amazing technique that I use now. I literally use when I'm writing my stuff. And keep in mind, you still have not made the publishing decision yet. We keep talking about this, right? You've not made it. At this editing stage, you're only editing for clarity and completeness, and that's it. Okay? Like I said, so we still have not and are not going to teach the publishing decision yet, because until you finish the book, that's not a relevant decision. Probably we're gonna do that in a webinar before Thanksgiving, at least. I'm not sure when, but we'll do it. All right. Any questions about editing?
So this isn't a question, but a note that Lynn mentioned that I think brings up something we can add to the teaching. She says, I realize once I write the story, the memory will bring up the emotion. However, I'm always at a loss about describing the emotion. I'm thinking like a thesaurus, I guess. It reminded me, so when we have the live version of this memoir workshop, we have the group sit down and we make promises to what we're going to do in our time together. And one of those promises is, I will label the emotions that I feel, and I will name the ones that I cannot. Like I'll name whatever I think that emotion is, or I will name that something is coming up that I can't identify. And even just that process of trying to like put those labels out there helps you get more access to those emotions over time.
It's so funny looking at teaching the two different workshops, because our nonfiction workshop is so fucking dialed in. Like we have every nook and cranny, and then then the memoir one, like we come across huge gaps. Like she's right. This is a huge gap. How do you write about emotions? Right? That's a massive thing you got to talk about in memoir stuff. And like, I didn't even think to put it in the workshop, which is funny because like I made my name writing memoirs, not conventional nonfiction books, although I'm very good at that too. And I've done those. It's a great question. And I have a really good answer for it. It's just not designed a part of the workshop. So, there is a book. I'm going to tell you the book that taught me how to write about emotions. It's called The Neon Bible by John Kennedy Toole. Neon Bible. You don't have to read it, although you could. It's a very short book. It's probably like 120 pages. It was written by, I think John Kennedy Toole is probably the greatest American novelist. He wrote a book called Confederacy of Dunces that won the Pulitzer Prize, or the Pulitzer Prize. He killed himself because he couldn't get it published. And that was the only book he ever wrote. Neon Bible was an essay he wrote for an essay contest when he was 16. He was, as far as I can tell, he was a really weird kid, probably almost autistic in a way, but not literally, because he was really good at understanding people and emotions. He was just a very unusual dude. And when I read Neon Bible, it blew me down. Like, a lot of people talk about Catcher in the Rye. I thought that book kind of sucked, honestly. If you loved it, cool. It didn't resonate with me. I thought it was phony, ironically, right? But when I read Neon Bible, it was like all the things I heard people say about Catcher. I'm like, okay, now I get it, right? Because this is a book that did that to me. Neon Bible hit me in an emotional place that to that point in my life, no other book I'd ever had. And I wrote that when I was like 26 or 27. It was right before I really started doing my own writing. It was right about when I did. Let me tell you, I can tell you exactly what John Kennedy Toole does so effectively. So the book is essentially a 12-year-old kid who's navigating a bunch of racial disharmony and cultural disharmony in the South in Louisiana. It's basically him when he was growing up. And he tackles some of the most complex, difficult issues I've ever seen anyone tackle in a novel. And the way he does it is so fucking genius because he writes about it so simply. He doesn't try and tell you what anyone else is thinking. He doesn't try and tell you what's going on in terms of like the complex interconnections. He doesn't try and explain anything. He tells you what he saw and what he felt. He literally, this is where I got the scribe memoir algorithm, is from the Neon Bible. Because the book is nothing more. It's not a memoir. It is basically a memoir. This is like a good example of a memoir, autobiographical novel, because it's his life. But it's published as fiction. But it is written as a memoir. And it is nothing more than what happened and what he felt over and over and over. And then the way he talks about his emotions is the way a 12-year-old would. I saw that and I felt sad. Because he so starkly and honestly describes events. He describes events the way, like I have young kids now. And one of the things I love about them is like, they're not afraid to speak truth. I'm not afraid. If I'm famous for anything, I'm willing to tell the fucking truth always, even hard truths about myself, anyone. But kids will go even a step further. Like they're just ruthless with the truth in a great way. And that's all the book was. It was just like, oh, this person said this, and then I saw them do this, and this is how I felt. Over and over and over. It's very simple. The way you write about hard emotions and complex emotions is to state them in the simplest terms possible. I know it sounds like it's too simple to be true. But go look at all the books I wrote. They're the same way. And go look at his book. They're the same way. And go look at all the great memoirs. Not necessarily there's a lot of memoirs. Like, I'll give you a really good example. And again, probably a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. Mary Karr is a pretty famous memoirist. I don't think her shit's going to last. Her stuff it's very overwritten. Most memoirs are very overwritten. The ones that last are not. Another great example, arguably the greatest memoir ever written is what? Diary of Anne Frank. You can't find a more simple book in terms of like expressing. This was a little girl hiding in the attic from Nazis and ran through the whole gamut of emotions, never used a word that a 12-year-old wouldn't know because she was like 13 or 14. She wrote about the most difficult shit a human can go through, just about as simple as possible. I know, like, you know why a lot of people don't like this advice or they don't use it? Because writing simply about your emotions forces you to face them, which is hard. All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
I wanted to add one more piece of that just
Please.
came to mind. I've been having this realization lately. I deal with anxiety from time to time. And in the first draft of my memoir, it was just like filled with anxiety. I was just writing about my anxiety all the time. And what I wasn't writing about was the actual emotions underneath the anxiety. Like it took me getting the whole draft out to realize, oh, anxiety is just like a cover. It's a smokescreen. And underneath that anxiety are all these emotions that I'm not letting myself feel. And that's why I feel anxious. Anyway, so it happens in layers like that. It just peels back.
That is an amazing point that we probably need to add to the workshop too. Don't be shocked if your first draft is writing about how you feel because of your emotions as opposed to the underlying emotions. I'm afraid of feeling my emotions is a very different thing than here's what my emotions feel. And you got a lot of times the path to the emotions are through the fear of the emotions. Yeah, fuck yeah, it is. All right.
So next question, we are still going to cover vomit drafting, right? Or did you cut that out of this?
No,
okay.
No, I cut it because I don't think it makes sense to teach for memoir. Because like the way that we're telling people to do, it's essentially a vomit draft.
Yeah.
But the psychology of vomit draft is assuming you're going to publish. You know? So like, that's why I don't think it makes sense here.
We do have a question from Jack, which I don't think you covered in that writing section, about not going back to edit while writing.
Yeah. Um, I gotta put that in. So what we teach in the nonfiction is a thing called a vomit draft, right? The basic idea is you don't read what you write and you don't edit it as you write. I go back and forth with this in memoirs, honestly, Emily. You should definitely do that if you're writing a conventional, like a knowledge share nonfiction book. You should absolutely use vomit draft style and just write straight through. Don't read it, don't edit until you're done with the rough draft or the vomit draft, and then go back and start editing. I'm honestly not sure with memoir if that's the best way to do it. It really depends on a lot of factors. Here's the thing. If you have truly internalized that you are writing this book only for yourself and you are writing it as if no one will ever read it and you are just going to tell the truth, then you don't need vomit draft instructions. You don't need to worry about, because then if you're truly just writing it for yourself, you're not worried about what anyone else is going to think. But if you have not done that, if that is an impossible bridge to cross for you, then you can go look at our writing instructions on YouTube for knowledge share nonfiction, for the nonfiction ones, and you can really review the vomit draft instructions. But the basic idea is simple. You don't read or edit anything you write as you're writing it for the first draft. You just write straight through. You literally don't even look back. You just write. If it's impossible for you to let go of judgment, the potential for judgment, then that's a way to get out of that. Yeah. I'm torn whether we should teach that with memoir or not, honestly.
Yeah, I think I think there is value in going back to stories that you've written. I wouldn't even call it editing, because most people's frame for what it means to edit is like to analyze line by line. That's not what I mean in this case. I think it's helpful to go back, read those stories, and then say, like, is there more emotion here? Is there more experience here that I missed on the first pass?
Yeah.
And I don't do that in the same session as the first time I write that story down. I write the story down, I continue writing other stories, and then sometimes that story will come back to me a week later or a month later, and then I'll realize there's more dimension to add there, and I will go back and I will write around that story. But it's not quite the same as like line editing and getting things quote unquote perfect.
Yeah, that's the thing with writing memoirs. It's so much messier than writing a nonfiction book. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard. This is, listen, all of you, this is a really important lesson. This is why there's only so much that can be taught about this. You can learn all of it, but there's only so much we can teach you ahead of time. I would say at most, we're going to teach you about a third to a half of what you're going to learn. Most of what you're going to learn, we cannot teach. It's not us. It's not that we're failures as teachers. We may be failures as teachers, but not for this reason. Most of what you're going to learn writing a memoir is unteachable ahead of time. And I don't just mean the specific emotional stuff about you. Like that's of course a big block. I just mean how you need to do it and how you need to go about it is in so many, because it is such an emotional process, there is just not a right way. There are guidelines and guardrails, and that is what in processes. That's what we've tried to give you. And I know they seem simple. They are. But the Romans conquered the world with 3 architectural tools and a sword and a shovel. Seriously, you ask the Roman army. They had a compass, what's the T-square, a sword, and a shovel. And they'll tell you the shovel was the most important thing. They basically had 4 tools and conquered the world. Complexity does not mean it's better. I wish life would be easier.
We are having a few people who've been in Scribe Writer's Room for a bit write into the chat that the vomit draft has been really essential in their process. So if you're listening to this and you have not gone through any of the nonfiction, the knowledge share webinars from last week, I would encourage you, if you're stuck in your head and you cannot stop judging your own writing, I would encourage you to go check out the vomit draft instructions and follow that process.
Yeah, I guess we do need to mention it. Like I'll mention it as a tool. My thinking was that if you've really just let go and you're writing for yourself, that's not a problem. And I'm right. The problem is saying you're going to let go and actually letting go are totally different things.
That's exactly the problem. Yeah. Yeah. This question you may address later, but I can't remember your sequence. So Melissa's asking, there are so many stories that other people find interesting from her life. Could be more than one book. How, after she's done the writing for herself, how does she make decisions about which ones stay to share with other people?
We're going to cover that in publishing. Like, if your book is not done, and I mean completely done, and you're worried about publishing, you are distracting yourself from feeling emotions that you need to in order to finish your memoir. There's a reason I won't talk about the publishing decision in this. It's not an accident. It's because people will then focus on that and will not write their book. I'm not here to sell you publishing. I'm here to help you write your book. And if you don't want to write your book, that's okay. You can't hide in this program. We don't sell bullshit. We don't give bullshit away or sell it, either one. This is not the program for people who want to hide, who want to bullshit themselves, who want to have niceties said to them, who want to just buy hope and guilt reduction, who want to pretend they're doing something and not. You can go to a Tony Robbins seminar, or I'm not trying to shit on Tony. If you like Tony, that's cool. But a lot of the people I know that go to his stuff are the what I call spiritual bypassers. They want to get the feeling of work without doing work. And almost everyone else in the book writing, especially the memoir sphere, they don't cover any of the hard emotional stuff because they don't know how to do that, because they've never written those books. They don't know what they're doing, right? Okay. If that's where you want to be, that's okay. Those people will serve you better. This place and these instructions are for people who are really serious about doing the work. There's no way around it. Like, you cannot worry about, especially if it's your first book. I'm a little different because I've been doing this 7 times, but even me, like, I'm in the middle of writing one of the hardest memoir I've ever written. I'm not worried about publishing right now. It's probably going to be multiple books. Like, now I've got it. God, man, it might be 4 different books. I'll figure it out later. I'm writing right now. That's it. I mean, I'm happy to take more questions about it. I'm not going to give you the publishing answers until your book is done. We will do that seminar and that workshop, and that will be free. I still think we're going to gate it somehow. I think it would be pretty cool if, because that's the whole point, is that you can't get to the material on how to make a publishing decision until your book is done, because that's a really good trick to get people to let go of that. I don't know. I haven't decided. We'll see.